Welcome to Sustainability's Leading Voices, part of Britain's biggest sustainability campaign. Today I'm joined by Kresse Wesling, CBE, for Circular Solutions Week. Kresse has been applying practical circular economy solutions in the fashion industry for almost 20 years. Welcome, Kresse. So, Kresse, tell us about Elvis and Kresse.
So Elvis and Kresse does essentially three things. We rescue materials like old fire hoses that would otherwise go to landfill. We transform them into beautiful things like bags, belts, and wallets, homeware, lots of interesting kinds of projects. And then we donate 50% of the profits to charity. And in the case of the fire hose, it's the firefighters' charity.
Elvis and Kresse as a brand has grown to be a major player in sustainable fashion. Can you tell us how you got there?
Our business model has always just been a couple of values on a page. We've never had a chart or a graph that said we needed to take 1% of the market or 10% of the market and we were going to be worth X billion by X time. Um, we've we've potentially never pursued growth. Okay. What we have pursued every single time is change. We wanted to change the future of decommissioned fire hoses. We want to change the future of leather offcuts, and not just Burberry's leather offcuts, but the 800,000 tons that exist worldwide. And that's why we've grown, because the challenges that we've taken on have become increasingly bigger as we've grown in confidence. And 50% of our profits goes to charity, but 50% of the profits has always been reinvested into R&D and doing more radical things. Because we don't have shareholders, because we don't have debt, we've always been able to pursue that radical path.
The circular economy requires us to think really creatively about waste materials. That creativity, that research, and that development has been so integral to your business all the way along. Can you talk to us about what inspired you to first use fire hose?
I moved to the UK in 2004, and I think a lot of people, when they first come here, might want to, I don't know, go to the National Gallery or Buckingham Palace. And I was more interested in how much waste the UK was producing. So I went to the British Library. I started researching how much waste was produced here, and I discovered it was 100 million tons in that year. And that set off a whole chain of events. One, going to loads of landfill sites, and finally ended up in me discovering a fire hose. And that every year, 3 to 10 tons of fire hoses go to landfill because they're either too old, they reach the end of their health and safety life, or they're too damaged to repair. And I thought, this is a really undignified death for such a heroic material, and started bringing it home.
What's been your experience of bringing waste materials and circularity principles into the luxury fashion space?
I think one of the reasons why our concept worked, or why our business worked, is that we spent so much time researching. And what we were in love with was the fire hose. So we were in love with that problem and we wanted to know everything about it. What is it made from? What are its properties? What is its potential? What is the next best possible life for this material? And that's when we discovered that various French luxury brands were using a similar material in their collections. And that really led us to think that luxury needed to change. We looked at that whole industry as a structural failure. We looked at mounds of creativity and flows of cash and flows of material, but we looked at something that was effectively extractive and, in lots of parts of the world, exploitative in terms of the supply chain and labor forces. So we knew that we could rescue the hose and disrupt luxury at the same time, which was kind of a win-win.
Building on the idea that the industry is a structural failure because it's extractive, what is it going to take for that to change at scale?
So there's seems to be at the moment an inherent tension within those businesses, because there's still this assumption that you can only make the best things if you use what is considered to be the best materials. And those materials are cashmere, cotton, leather. And actually, we have to be much more open minded. We have to really unleash the creative energy that is in this sector. And that's when we're going to be able to love and cherish new materials. That's when we're going to be able to achieve the cultural shift that's required to really deliver a circular economy. But I think that tension is very strong within luxury. And I think that's an issue. Also, scale is an issue because some of the more novel materials or the waste materials are not available in the kind of scaled quantities that they're used to operating in.
You talk about adapting to new materials and creating that cultural shift to a circular economy. As someone who's a real leader in this space and has been doing that for so long, can you talk us through what the circular economy is?
The circular economy, okay, according to Kresse, the circular economy, according to Kresse. So if I get to define it, I'm going to define what I want it to be, is where every single material atom is in perpetual use or reuse or in the process of being transformed into a state of reuse. All of that is done with renewable energy. None of that is done with extraction or exploitation. And capital also flows in a circular fashion. It does not concentrate in the hands of the few. It's diffuse, it's collaborative, and it means that the wealth of the world is shared.
When we talk about the circular economy, which you do in such an articulate way, Cressy, do you think that the average consumer really understands it and buys into the principles behind it?
I think most people inherently get it. Whether you're the older generation that grew up with a deposit system where you were taking things back and getting money back from them and seeing things be remade, whether you're from the really old generation where every spare bit of cloth was saved and turned into a quilt or socks were darned, or whether you're from a younger generation where you just see change as really a part of life, and that actually the best thing that we could all collectively do would be to care for the environment. I think it's not the public that is holding anyone back. It really genuinely to me is rampant capitalism and regulation. So right now we have a system where you can privatize profit but socialize risk. And you see that very obviously in single-use packaging.
You're absolutely right. But if citizens already understand the circular economy as a social norm and understand these concepts, what is getting in the way of businesses adopting that and moving towards circular models?
I think the practicality of it and the day-to-day operational integration is what's tricky. For small, nimble organizations, we just see it as what should be done. So this is what we're going to do because we don't have to fight against the legacy industry, marketing teams, PR teams, conservative design teams, huge supply chains that are used to doing one thing one way and don't necessarily want to shift. If we want to make a shift, we can shift tomorrow. So I think the concept is something that is absolutely, if everyone could wholesale adopt it now, or if everyone could go back 20 years and start putting in the practices, they'd all do it. But the practicality is what's more difficult.
Supply chains and operational structures are clearly the problem. What can we do to encourage businesses to adopt circularity without creating a cliff edge for them?
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree. You cannot push companies off a cliff, or we would have economic catastrophe. We would have huge unemployment. We would have no more energy supply. The cliff edge is not right. But we've seen the writing on the wall since 1992.
You're right, the climate problem isn't new, and to some extent, some of these companies have created their own cliff edge. What would you do to make it easier for your industry to make that transition and evolve towards circular models?
What most companies want is just a roadmap. We had a fantastic cultural shift in the UK around single-use plastic bags. We said we were going to tax them. Everybody was warned. And then the 5p tax came in. And after that tax came in, plastic bags virtually disappeared. To me, it was glorious to see that. And with a 5p intervention. So what could we do if we said things like, we are going to go for the electrification of cars by 2030? Well, suddenly you see those products come into the market. If you do wonderful things like in Paris, where you say by 2030, all new roofs or in the city of Paris are either going to have to be solared or green living roofs. Give people a time horizon and then watch the creativity unfurl. If we said by 2030, no more single-use plastic, trust me, this country, with its creative energy and its brilliant people in packaging, would come up with unbelievable solutions that would unlock whole new parts of the economy and whole new kinds of materials, and would be new sources of income and new sources of export.
So how do we achieve that?
The government needs to put in a laddered roadmap for change. So we need to say, by this point in time, and none of these deadlines, by the way, can be 2050. These deadlines have to be 2030, 2035. And it should be zero waste to landfill, zero waste to incineration, zero single-use goods. Potentially, we need a deposit system on clothing and textiles. We need to have huge backing and support for some of the innovations in the UK that are looking at how to deconstruct polycottons, how to deconstruct cellulose materials. There are technologies out there that can do this. Worn Again is a great example of one, but we do not support these technologies to scale.
Excellent point, Kresse. So you're talking about really practical solutions that are so essential to a sustainable future for all of us. Why do you think the government hasn't funded those solutions already?
I mean, the government loves to fund big things. They like to say HS2, and that's billions, and it's long to the future. And fusion or nuclear power plants, they love big projects. And actually, we know that some of the smaller, more humble projects are much more effective. So we know that we can completely dramatically and unbelievably reduce flooding if we actually give farmers the funding they require to transition to regenerative agriculture. That transition takes 5 to 7 years. Farmers need to be helped through that. It's actually really cost effective to help them do that because it prevents potentially the billions that we're spending on cleanup after floods.
What do we need to see from the next government to achieve this by 2030?
Somebody has the courage of their convictions and just goes for it, that they have the potential to be a hero. You know, whoever comes in can either be average, and we don't have time for that, or they can be a hero. And they have to start deciding that now.
Thank you for joining me, Kresse, and sharing so many insightful and practical solutions. If you've been watching this live, then do come over and join us on Twitter now for the Ethical Hour Twitter chat. Come and have your say with the hashtag Ethical Hour. And head to ethicalhour.com to find the campaign and have your say in our Circular Solutions consultation. This has been part of Britain's biggest sustainability campaign, and over the next 19 weeks, we're covering a different topic every week with another leading voice. We'll see you next week.